Mall of America. For more than 30 years, it has been a retail leader and an international destination, and it remains the largest mall in the U.S. Not to mention, it welcomes millions of guests from around the world. It's huge, but it's also so much more. In this podcast, you're going to hear the real stories of how it started and why it continues to thrive. You'll hear about challenges we faced along the way and what you can learn from them. We will feature guests and experts from all walks of life and business, and along the way, you'll laugh, learn, and maybe even change the way you look at things. So if you're a fan of the mall, a brand new visitor, an entrepreneur, or a dreamer, prepare to dive deep into so much more. This podcast is presented by the Bloomington Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Hey, everyone. Join us on this episode of So Much More as we learn the proper pronunciation of Greek last names. We are here with Erin Hatzikostas, author of You Do You-ish and The 50% Rule. First time at Mall of America.
That's a big deal.
It is.
And I'm almost jealous that it's your first time. Like, I wish I could redo it for the first time.
I also feel really crappy that it's my first time because I live 2 states away.
That's okay.
This is the way to do it.
That's all
This
right.
is truly
Yeah.
the way to do it.
Yeah.
Right? On the heels of 50.
Well, I was just waiting for the VP from the organization to ask me to come. I mean,
It's
I'm kind of that kind of person.
This is the only time
was you.
anybody has
She was
considered
waiting
my
for
title
you.
at all. Like, wait a minute, a VP is reaching out.
Well, at first I was like, huh, who's this guy? I was like, oh, maybe he's not making stuff up. Let's do this.
I love when he had mentioned it to me. He's like, she's going to come out. He's like, this is my idea. And honestly, your ideas always get me every single time because they're so outlandish. So I could only imagine the pitch you gave her.
Oh, it's very authentic.
Amazing.
Very
I mean,
authentic.
again, it was such an easy pitch because when you told me, I was like, yes, immediately. Bring her out. Let's figure it out. We'll do something.
Actually, when I got it, I think I sent it to my podcast co-host, Nicole, and my publisher.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think the only answer to this is yes.
100%.
Right?
That is it.
So
yeah.
just to set the stage, so you do the Authenticity Awards.
Mm-hmm.
And I became aware of your work through my wife, who read your book and passed it on to me. Then I started listening to your podcast for millennial women because it speaks to me. And you mentioned on there the Authenticity Awards happening on same day, National Roller Coaster Day.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those what ifs. There just felt like there was an opportunity there. So I thought, let's reach out and see if you don't have any plans for the announcements yet. Why not announce them?
Which you didn't know me well enough.
I'm a roller coaster.
I hadn't figured out what I was doing 3 weeks later. So
So it was
This is perfect.
yeah, not a planner.
But I love the fact that you get the email, and I got a response fairly quickly, and I was like, I'm not used to that either. Like, oh no, this is great. Now we got to do the thing. Yeah,
We're gonna do it.
We're
It's
gonna do it. We'll
amazing.
figure it out.
Oh, did I really mean it?
That was awesome. So thank you for saying yes
Yeah,
to
thanks for
A Weird
having
Idea. And by the time this airs, the awards will have been announced, but you have yet to announce them, and you have yet to conquer the roller coasters on
Right.
your own. How are you feeling coming into this? How are you?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like I can do it probably without throwing up.
good news.
I might tinkle.
Big
a little
plus.
bit, but
Big
other than that-
Tinklings, I would prefer tinkle over
I mean,
Wiltrum.
I mean, I've got 2 children, so at this point, a little tinkle. It's
nothing.
It's nothing I've never done
Is
before.
there
That's
a day
success.
that goes by without it?
Yeah, no.
No, this is exciting. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for letting us play in this space with you. And I guess I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about authenticity can feel like a buzzy word right now, especially. But you've been beating the authenticity drum for a while and believe in it so much that you just kind of uprooted your entire career and lifestyle and doubled down on just being you and
On one
sharing,
frickin' word.
right? And sharing with others how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy because, first of all, I have a attention span of a fly. So I've been doing this for 5.5 years. And so the fact that I'm still focused on one word, which is obviously it's more than that, but really on this concept of authenticity, I guess I really believe in it. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I didn't know it until it sort of was in the past. And, you know, what happened, my story goes that I actually became the CEO of a subsidiary company of a larger Fortune 50 company and had no idea what I was doing. I was actually interim CEO first.
So glad to hear that. so glad to hear that.
Yeah, now you know, right? I didn't quite tell my boss that, but
It's okay. Sometimes drink from the fire hose. You got to.
no idea and never aspired. And in fact, I don't want to say I anti-aspired, but I guess I did a little bit because the year before that, my boss was the COO, and he actually called me up on a Friday and was like, "Hey, I've decided to leave. Is it okay if I put in your name as my
Amazing.
likely successor?"
Yeah.
And I like really quickly responded like, "No, thank you."
Oh,
Yeah.
As I'm like, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fierce. Also, I
Right?
see your perspective too.
And it wasn't fear. Like I'm pretty confident. I had gotten the memo on imposter syndrome. I had learned what it took to like sort of lean over your skis and all of that. But I just, like so many people, had this vision. I call it the compromise calculation I write about in the first book, where there was this direct correlation that as your career goes up, everything else goes down, right?
Yep.
Like there's this anti-correlation. So
Yep.
time with your family, your spouse, your kids, time to exercise, and even to be who you are, right? Like you had to sort of compromise everything else. And so the story goes that I said no, thank you. And then thought about it over the weekend, though. He was smart. He was like, well, actually, he was really smart. So I don't tell this very often, but I said, well, if I don't take it, who likely would it be?
Yeah, always the follow-up.
And I don't know if this was strategic or not, but he literally said the dude I hated more than anything on team. And so
It's a good play.
That is a good play.
Dude, I hope you're listening.
I was like, mother. So part of me was like, if I say no, I'm gonna have to freaking work for this guy, which was worse than. But the big epiphany I had was that I was doing this compromise calculation, and that I sort of assumed, to take on that sort of executive role, I had to do it like everybody else. And I have this saying that I say over and over again: you shouldn't not do something because you hate the way it was done before. Instead, do it your own way, right? And there's so many times we're just like, nope, I don't want to be that, or I don't want to do that, or I don't want to go on that roller coaster, or whatever it is, because we think we have to do it normal. So anyway, did that, was in it for a year. Then my boss, that was the CEO, left. He was assigned to a huge, huge acquisition, actually, and he called me up. Always opportune time. So then that call was worse than a call on a Friday afternoon when I was working from home. We were in Florida. I remember being in my parents' spare bedroom. We were down there visiting them. And I literally was like packing my purse and my bags to go to a water park for the day, which is actually my jam.
Yeah.
I don't like roller coasters, but I love water parks. So I'm going to a place where I'm not going to have
We'll
my
talk more
phone.
after.
I'm going to be in like my bathing suit. I'm disengaging from being an executive, right? And my boss calls me up, Steve, and Steve's like your classic, like executive forever. Half of what he says is wrong. It's terrible.
Did you panic when you saw it? You're like, oh no.
Yeah, of course you get this. Like,
Yeah, you're like, it's
stomach.
Steve.
It can't be good, right? Like I'm the COO, he's the CEO. And he said, look, I'm getting reassigned to this big acquisition, and we're going to name you interim CEO, but we're going to still look, post the job to see if there's anything any better.
Yeah.
Which is not his words verbatim, but that was the translation in my head. And I remember first just being really ticked off, right? Like, I'm
He just pushed you in.
And then I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't know if I want it either. So
Yeah.
while you're testing me out, I'm going to test it out too. And so anyways, long story short, I end up kind of kicking butt for 3 months. They had to give it to me. I was doing well in the role. And then, the company was in the pooper. We had, 4 years of flat earnings, couldn't reinvest in ourselves. So you can imagine employee company culture was in the just doldrums, right? Like we weren't necessarily winning. We weren't able to do the projects we wanted to do. And in 3 years, we were able to triple our earnings.
Wow.
That time went from 17 million to 50 million, literally almost tripled them. Employee engagement skyrocketed. But even though things went really well, I kept thinking, I wonder when I'm going to be found out. And it wasn't imposter syndrome. Like I said, it was more of this, I'm not sacrificing. I'm not compromising. I'm not sacrificing as much as everybody else. And there's got to be a time limit on that, right? Like, I was working hard, but I wasn't getting on planes every week to visit customers like a lot of my peers were. I had small children. I couldn't do that. Husband with an intense job, all that. I, wasn't giving up my vacations like some people were. I had a friend, one of my girlfriends who was a peer of mine, moved her family 3 times in 5 years.
Wow.
I'm like, I moved out to Connecticut from Michigan. Like, that's it, right? Done. So, I kind of always felt that. And then I just had this itch to do something new. And so what happened was I decided I was going to retire because technically I could. I was only 44, but I had been at the company my whole career.
Yep.
and was just itching for, I thought it would be go maybe run a smaller healthcare startup, right? Just get that flavor. So it wasn't necessarily doing what I'm doing. And people kept saying, we're going to miss your authentic leadership. And I wasn't surprised they called me authentic, but it was like this, like nobody had been saying this before. Now all of a sudden it's like 9 out of 10 emails, conversations. And what hit me after I saw so many of those and kind of put it together was that I wasn't going to be found out. I was actually just playing a different game than everybody else. And as I reflected, it wasn't voodoo. It was, I got the best talent because word was on the street, like she's different than other executives, right? Our negotiations went really well because I didn't go in and BS them. I literally was just like, one negotiation, I was like, well, if we get better rates, I'll have a better chance of being permanent CEO. So like it just like puked out of my mouth. And then surprisingly, this guy was like, oh, I want to help you out. And so, so there were things like that. And what I realized too was I had kind of been doing that my whole career. And I think this is important for listeners. We hear it's cliche, what got you here won't get you there. But about half the time it actually will. Like in that instance, what had made me successful was the same stuff I should be doing. Just because I had a bigger title shouldn't mean that I shouldn't do the running man at an office party, right?
Yeah.
Like, these same things that had made me likable and wanted to do business with. So, and I think, so the story goes, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was dabbling in some things. And then I would go to my son's hockey practice. He plays hockey. And I would sit in those god-awful, cold bleachers. And I decided just to like blog, but just in a Word document, like, oh, here are some draft blogs. Yeah. And I don't consider myself a writer. Well, I do now, but at the time I was a math major and stuff. Yeah. And did it for, I don't know, it was like a month and a half. And I looked down, I had 57 pages.
Amazing.
And I was like, I got something to say.
Yeah.
And once I started reflecting and then I started working on the book, the big thing that hit me, because I couldn't figure out, I said, I don't just walk into work like I walk into my friend's party. Like I knew it was more nuanced, this authenticity that I had collected this data. And I realized that so many people talk about it as being yourself. So it feels like, it's permission for you, right? And then you go, that sounds great, but I need results. I need to do things for other people. And what I realized was that's not what it is. It's something totally different. And once I realized that, found the Greek root word, redefined it, and realized it isn't just a permission to make you be able to say yes, but it's actually the thing that can make your career and your business thrive. I was like, oh shit, I think I need to go talk about this. And that's where I'm at.
And here we are.
Here I'm talking about it.
And
the
here
Mall of
we
America.
are. Right. So first impressions, you come in here, you got to walk the property a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you see 50% rule?
Yeah. So first of all, the 50% rule is.
Oh, and also we should talk about it did evolve, right? 50% rule is stated, then kind of evolved to its own book. It had a spinoff.
Its own book. It's sitting here on the table. The first time I saw it, like 3 minutes ago.
Part of the Authenticity literary universe.
Yeah. I mean,
I like that.
There we go. Yeah.
So, I mean, first of all, I'll backtrack and say, yes, you guys, you wrote me and I was excited, but I don't just chase shiny objects. I joke about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a budget, right? And all these, I have time. And I did some reconnaissance on the mall and on the work you've done, Chris. And I love being able to work with people where I can say, this is what I'm freaking talking about, right? Like, I don't want to just work with people to say, oh, this is cool, this is flashy, right? And immediately I saw authenticity, but then I also saw the 50% rule. And the 50% rule is sort of an authenticity hack, if you will, that I sort of came up with along the way that basically says, here's another way to think about you should do it your own way, right? And the concept is essentially anytime you're doing something new, you're trying to break through noise, you're listening to somebody's advice, you're developing a new product, whatever, only take about half of what is normal, of what they're telling you or what is standard. And I'd love to tell the Santa Claus example, and keep half of it. Like if you're going to have a Christmas themed thing, like you need some version of Santa Claus. Maybe don't throw out everything, but how can you do it half different? What is the stuff that bores you? Is it the guys that are kind of creepy and boring. And
Sure
a critical
is.
element.
It sure is that.
You throw your 4-year-old daughter on and you're like,
Right?
keep an eye on him, you know? And so the 50% rule is essentially this concept that you should always do sort of half normal, half new. And it's really, it's evolved, or I wouldn't have written a book. And part of what's so cool about it is it started as this, like, to get over your, can I swear?
You already have.
To get over your poopy stuff. You're like, I wouldn't have
It's good we covered that. No.
I've heard your podcast. I've heard your co-host. The rule really started as, like, I was having trouble getting over my own shit as I was building my business. So while I was talking about authenticity, I was getting told, here's how you write an email to get people on your email list. And here's the formula for building a speaking career. I mean, you guys know, right? Like, especially now, it's like everybody's selling something. There's so much advice.
It's exhausting.
And it's great, right? To not make all the same mistakes, but you get, like, lured in and you're like, oh my God, I got to go through the checklist. And so I found myself having big trouble with that and going, why? I know I'm a hardworking, motivated, like, I do big things. I've been successful. Why am I feeling so stuck? And once I had this epiphany about the 50% rule, I was like, oh my God, that's so much more fun. Right. And it activates self-determination theory, which I talk about in the book. Like, if you have a say in something, you're going to be self-propelled. But the coolest part about it and why I wrote a book is there's all these sort of, like, children that spawned off in this lessons. And what I started to see is I saw it in the wild, like I've seen it at the Mall of America, so I got so obsessed with it over the years, not just using it, but giving advice to people like, why don't you just 50% rule it? And they'd be like, huh? And then I would tell them and they'd be like, oh,
it makes so much sense. Yeah.
And so I started to see it. I went to Hamilton and I was like, so good. He 50% rolled Broadway, right? He 100%. Did half normal, half new. That's why people loved it. I saw it with the Savannah Bananas baseball team who said,
oh, they're so
baseball
good.
is so wonderful and it's half boring. And they created Banana Ball. Like, nobody's reinvented the sport of anything, basically, but they reinvented Banana Ball and it's got half the old rules. And I saw them explode, right? I saw it with John Madden and how he approached his broadcasting career, who obviously became one of the most well-known, I mean, he's on a video
legendary,
game, right?
Absolutely.
So when first of all, you guys sort of, you and what you do, like, I was like, oh, they get it. Like, they get authenticity, but they get the 50% rule. But it was really cool. Chris took us on a little tour of your holiday display.
Unprompted, Nicole
Candy
mentioned, she said kitschy, and we were down in the atrium, and I was like,
do I have a place
I
for
got you covered. Yeah.
And she's like, I said the magic word, and next thing you know.
Did you get in the car?
I got in the car. I got in the throne. Good. But it was funny. Chris started telling us some examples, and so, for example, he talks about how he is right here, but we'll present.
Yes, yep, he's present.
How you had the normal Santa Clauses, but you're like, they're just, they're not that charismatic, they're not that different, and how instead you still have Santa, but you hire improv actors, and like, oh my God, people, listen to this. Like, simple thing where you stop and say, and that's what 50% rule does. What's our intent? There's, like, first and foremost, what is our intent? Our intent is to have a magical experience. Santa is probably table stakes. But, like, what is missing? Well, the engagement, the uniqueness, the, customizing it. Like you said, improv actors can really, like, read the room and talk to a kid differently each time. And so that's just like one of the many examples. I mean, I saw so many. You've got the car instead of the sleigh. And it's like a perfect example. You have to have the presence and you have to have like this concept that something flies through the air, but does it really have to be the same old sleigh like that everybody's been displaying since 1912? So I love it. You guys are living it.
It's super fun. It really is. And it's been fun, again, to read your first book. I'm excited to read your second book. But hearing you speak about it, it's nice to be able to contextualize a little bit of how I try to approach things. For me, it's always been the what if or yes if rather than no because. And we have the most fun when it is just a little skewed. It's just a little different. And that seems to be the thing we get most excited about and then deliver on most effectively.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys are a really cool job, but the message to the listeners is I don't care how boring your job is. Like, I don't care if you're talking about a Christmas display at the Mall of America, or you're talking about a project report out meeting on your IT project. Like, stop and think, okay, what's the intent, and what is the half that works, and what is the half that we're just going through the motions and needs to be reinvented and needs to be done differently.
Yeah.
And I think inherently we're all in those meetings and we're thinking that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every single person leaves
Right?
thinking it.
Yeah. And it takes somebody or something to challenge that convention and make it more interesting and engaging. And it is a lot of, I feel like there's the idea of the business world
Yeah.
and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to play in it. But when you constrain people from being who they are, like you can still be professional and wear a t-shirt with rap lyrics on it.
Yeah, exactly, like one of our
And,
nominees.
and get your job done.
And you're going to get it done better.
Right.
Yeah. And not to be a geek about the 50% rule, not even the book, the rule, what I've seen over the last 4 years that it's been in practice is that now there's a vernacular. Nicole's used it, my podcast, we use it in team meetings. People that are part of the book team, you could be in a meeting and you're like, and somebody will just be like, how do you what would you do if you 50% ruled it?
That's an
And
amazing
it's
perspective
like,
to take.
It's just the simple, right? Because normally it would be like, well, how would you do it differently? And your brain is like,
Everywhere.
right?
Yeah.
But if you're like, well, what would you do if you 50%? And there's something so grounding, but also tangible that allows your mind to sort of wander just enough.
It feels attainable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Amazing. We're going to use that moving forward.
You better.
We'll report. We'll send you an email every single time we did it.
Can you talk a little bit about the Authenticity Awards and where that came from?
Yeah. So the Authenticity Awards, so I'm kind of an idea machine, like you guys are, I'm sure. And about 4 years ago, I remember, I think I saw like a diversity index thing. And I'm like, I was just so frustrated. Like the work I do, there's still so many crappy companies and leaders that are just so stuffy and boring. And I'm like screaming inside. And so I thought, well, what if we had an authenticity index? Meaning like I could go, if I'm either going to work with the company or want to work at the company, and say, okay, they're an 82 on the scale, right? Like you would for a diversity index. And I thought, oh my God, how the hell do you do that? Like most of these partner with like Forbes and they're big, and I don't have enough clout and all that. And then, so the team started thinking, how do we baby step there? And the first baby step, actually, somebody on my team at the time, Debbie, was like, well, you could come up with a day. You can just make a National Authenticity Day.
Amazing.
And I was like, oh yeah. And then what if we did awards? Because the whole intent was to incentivize people and display those leaders that are authentic so that other leaders could be inspired and be like, okay, I'm going to do that too. So we decided, we came up with the day, created a separate website, and then we said, well, we're going to celebrate it by doing these awards. And every year, what I love about this story and why I tell it this way is like, if you have a big goal, like just start really, like we're on like step 7 of 100 to get to this authenticity index. We just added judges this year, which sounds really silly. It's not me behind the...
I was going to say, how many judges? Can we do it too?
We have 4 judges this year. Next year, you guys are definitely going to have a place on the panel. But, it's just like little baby steps for,
that's huge.
And it's really fun. Our trophies have gotten better too. I have the trophy. I'm going to break it out tomorrow.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
It's actually pretty lit, as my 13-year-old son would say.
Oh, that's high praise.
That is high praise.
But yeah, we have an authentic leader, authentic human, an authentic company. It's really fun, and we mostly just sort of promote it through LinkedIn and through my business contacts. And it's a great way to spotlight these people that are doing their stuff different.
Amazing stuff. Do you feel like, I'm so curious, and I think about generation all the time. We talk a lot about generation. Do you feel like when we talk about businesses and whatnot, and a lot of leaders, especially in those roles, are of a certain generation or probably close, do you feel like generation makes a difference in authenticity? Do you think younger is like skewing different with social media and all these things?
Here's the funny thing. So we did research.
Okay.
So 3 years ago, I think it was 22. We did the impact of authenticity in the workplace. And so we went out and did a legit survey, partnered with a research company. And most of the findings were just like, oh, wow, we knew that would happen. We didn't know it happened that much. So for example, authentic companies have 4 times greater trust, like 400% greater trust. There were a couple things that shocked us. Okay. One was around generations. So I think the general feeling, right? And I ask this when I do keynotes, and like, which generation wants, authenticity the most? And everybody's like, Gen Z or, Gen Y if they have or millennials. Our data found the exact opposite. So the ones that want it the most are like the boomers, then the Gen X, and then down from there.
I feel shocked.
Yes. And here's the explanation that I don't have in data, but I think is intuitive.
Sure.
People of the older generation, which I'm an X, so I am on the we want it. We just have been suppressed for so long.
Yep.
That we're like,
Sure.
wave the white flag. We're like, I give up.
We're done.
You're tired.
We're done faking it.
We're done.
Please.
Like, we just like
Let us
want
have
it.
this. Yeah.
But after 25 years of seeing all this BS, like, okay, that's the way it is. And so we want it more, but we just aren't. And those of the younger generation haven't been as sort of beat down. And so the lesson of that is everybody actually wants authenticity. Like the story I always say is, if you've ever been to a kid's birthday party, 4-year-old party, and they do the bouncy house, and then they come in and they do the pizza, and then they do the cake, and all the parents awkwardly stand around the edges waiting for the freaking thing to be done. And, they always have a little extra cake. And all the kids are like, I want an extra piece, and I want more ice cream, right?
Yeah.
And then they come around and they say, would you like a piece of cake? Now, what do most parents say?
Probably, if they've already had one, you've already had one.
But
right?
no, they ask the parents if they'd like another piece of cake.
Oh, no.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
right?
we're good. No, pass.
What are most of the parents thinking?
I want
Oh,
that
they
cake.
want that cake for
Want that
sure.
cake.
That is authenticity in the workplace.
Yeah. That's a great perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to share
Interesting.
with you that I just realized I 50% ruled my son's 4th birthday party because we did have a bouncy house, but we also created VIP lanyards and had a band play in the
100%.
garage.
Yes.
Of course.
I feel like you need to show
That's
all
right.
the Halloween photos. Like he is
Yep.
You could
done the
package up.
I forgot
thing.
about
You could
that. That was a
package up
fun
all
one.
the things
It
you
was a good one.
50% rolled
And I
at
did
home.
eat cake, as my slender figure will tell you. I did have the cake. Yeah, there's evidence of
Eat
cake
the damn
consumption.
cake.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. Where can people find you?
You can find me. Well,
I mean, other than top of the Google search, where else?
right. I would say if you can spell it, you can find me. That's the only problem. You have to spell it. Well, first, if you're a podcast listener, once you're done binging this one, we have a podcast called Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck. It's just the letter B, then CAUSE. So hop over there. We've been doing it for 5.5 years. It's zany. I have my co-host Nicole, who's here with me taking pictures. We have guests as well, and it's just all about like doing shit much more authentically at work. And then the other place would be go to LinkedIn. That's where I like a loser will respond even faster than I did in my
Response
email
quick.
because that's where I have friends.
Safe place.
And I share a lot of content there, so you can go there and you can find my website and all that stuff there as well. And yeah, check out the books. They're it's fun to read, right? It's not
Absolutely.
drill a hole in your head. business book,
It's a very, very easy read.
yeah,
Very easy
yeah.
read.
So
As you can see by the
war.
worn pages of the passed around copy of You Do You-ish. Yes.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying yes and joining us for this weird 26-hour adventure for you.
I actually am calling it an authenticity binger.
Okay,
I think
that's
binger
fair.
in my
I like
office.
that.
I think I'm like,
First annual
yeah.
Authenticity
It's binge.
Binger.
That's good.
Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you guys for having me.
Thank you, SJ, for joining us
you.
as well. And thanks for joining us on So Much More.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of So Much More. If you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you find your favorites, including Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts. And you can also watch a video cast on YouTube. Go to podcast.mallofamerica.com to leave a review, ask a question, or give us an idea for the show. Until next time, thanks for listening. So Much More is presented by the Bloomington Convention and Visitors Bureau, the official destination marketing organization for the city of Bloomington, Minnesota. Before your next trip to Mall of America, visit bloomingtonmn.org for answers to all your travel questions, deals and packages for hotel stays, and so much more.